This build is crazy. It has the fastest move speed I have ever seen, teleporting from monster to monster, dealing massive AoE and single target damage. This build was recently buffed in the latest patch, making it much stronger than ever before. This build is the Stormclaw Lightning Shred Druid. Now, before we get into the build, I am doing another giveaway. 2 more Diablo 4 Collector's Edition boxes arrived today, so I'm giving them away to 2 different winners. Link in the description if you want to enter to win. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and tune into my Twitch channel to see more Druid gameplay. Let's begin. All right, let's start with the skills this time. So we're going to get Storm Strike, of course. This is going to give us vulnerability on our attack once we get Fierce Storm Strike. And the reason we're doing this is because during boss fights, we want to be able to refresh vulnerability. Now, we are going to get the Exploit Glyph, so that already is going to give us lots of vulnerability when we're doing AoE, so we don't need to use this really against large hordes of monsters, but really this is more for against bosses where we want to refresh that vulnerability so we can easily cleave them down fast. And then when we get to the core skills, we're going to get Heart of the Wild, we're going to get Wild Impulses, of course, we're going to make our core skills stronger, we're going to get Predatory Instinct to increase our crit chance, and Jittergrade Gate in order to make our Werewolf move faster. 5 out of 5 Shred, this is going to be our core skill, Enhanced Shred, and then Primal Shred. Second and third attacks are going to perform a dash. In addition, Shred's critical strike damage is increased by 30%. This is huge. We're going to get a lot of guaranteed critical strikes in this build, and we're going to show you exactly how. Over here in the defensive tree, we're going to get Cyclone Armor. This is just so strong, giving us non-physical damage reduction. We're going to make it so enemies knocked back are going to get slowed, and then also periodically we're going to get an additional 30% damage reduction. Over here, what I think is actually really great is Vigilance, and we have to get at least 1 point in Ancestral Fortitude as a prereq in order to get to Vigilance. You gain 15% damage reduction for 6 seconds after using a defensive skill. This is super powerful in conjunction with Blood Howl. This is going to give us 15% attack speed. So right before you go into combat, I like to pop Blood Howl. Gives you 15% attack speed for 15 seconds, but also it's going to give us 15% damage reduction for 6 seconds. And by the way, every time you get a kill, it's going to reduce the cooldown of Blood Howl. And so you're able to almost always have this 15% DR up because you're constantly killing enemies. Blood Howl's constantly coming off cooldown. You can constantly use it over and over for almost a very persistent 15% attack speed and DR, making this a very, very strong combo. In addition, Cyclone Armor also gives you that same Vigilance bonus. We're not going to get anything in the Companion tree. Over here in the Wrath tree, we are going to get some Storm passives, 3 out of 3 Elemental Exposure and Endless Tempest. This is going to make Hurricane last longer, and this is going to make it so your Storm skills are going to apply vulnerability, which is really nice. Hurricane, this is going to help deal damage, which is going to help with Aspect of Disobedience, which we're going to get into. Enhanced Hurricane to slow them, and then Natural Hurricane to apply some vulnerability on enemies even further, in addition to Exploit Glyph and all those other things. We're going to get 1 point into Neurotoxin, and then we're actually going to get lots of points into Envenom. Poison enemies take additional critical strike damage, so we're going to do 3 out of 3 here, but when it comes to our items, we are going to want to increase Envenom as much as we can, so look for ranks of Envenom on your amulet. Poison enemies take up to 50% additional critical strike damage. You can get that to 60% if you get an amulet that gives +3 to it. This is just +2. Over here, Toxic Claws, critical strikes with werewolf skills deal 23% of their base damage as poisoning damage over 4 seconds. And the reason we want this is because we're using werewolf skills. We want to deal lots of poison damage with that, and then Aspect of the Blurred Beast is going to make that poison damage even better. Over here in our ultimate skill tree, we're going to get Grizzly Rage. This has been just so good in so many different builds. You're going to become unstoppable. You're going to get 20% actual move speed, not damage reduction, because we're going to make it a Grizzly Werewolf instead of a Grizzly Werebear. We're going to get unstoppable during it, and we're also going to get Supreme Grizzly Rage, so we're going to start generating Fortify as we are becoming a crazy werewolf. Then finally, in our key passive, we're going to get Lupin Ferocity. Every 6th werewolf skill hit critically strikes and deals 70% increased damage. This is huge because we have so much increased critical strike damage, and getting guaranteed crits is awesome. So this is one source of guaranteed crits. Now I want to talk a little bit about the aspects and the uniques that go into this build. Now I hear you guys last time I made a Storm Druid build. I started with Tempest Roar. I'm starting with Tempest Roar again here. And I know a lot of you might say, oh, do we need this in order to put the build together? The answer for this build is no. The last build, the Tornado Druid one, yeah, you kind of need Tempest Roar. This build, I would say it's a very nice to have, but it's not required. This is really great because it basically makes it so you get all the synergies from your Storm skills. So Hurricane's going to get your synergies, Cyclone Armor, Storm Strike. All those Storm skills becoming Werewolf skills is just really great. And on top of that, this has some good affixes. We got Damage While Shapeshifted, critical strike damage. It's really good, right? Not to mention Storm skills can grant you extra spirit. So all around, this is just such a great unique. You don't need it though for the build. You could put some other like defensive or utility in your helmet instead, but I recommend Tempest Roar as best in slot for this build. Very very similar to the Tornado Druid, we are going to get Vigorous Aspect because we're going to be in a Werewolf a lot of the time. You're going to get 14% DR up to 15 with this. Vigorous Aspect, very, very good. Throw it in the chest. I think it's great. When it comes to the gloves, now I actually rolled pretty bad stats on this one. You're probably going to want increased ranks of Shred on this, and also you're going to put Aspect of the Blurred Beast in here, which says, while dashing, Shred seeks out nearby poisoned enemies, instantly dealing a percentage of the poisoning damage to them. That's why we put so many points into Envenom and Toxic Claws. Toxic Claws gets more and more poison damage the more points you put into it, and so this is going to instantly deal a percentage of that poisoning damage, which is why we want more and more poison damage with this build, which is different than that Tornado build. When it gets to the leg slot, we want Aspect of Disobedience. You can see here there's a perfect roll. You gain 0.5% increased armor when you deal any form of damage. That's why Hurricane's so good. You're dealing a ton of AoE damage, increasing your armor. Armor is probably the best defensive stat in the entire game right now. They're probably going to change it in the future, but right now you want to stack as much armor as possible, and so this is a great way to do it with Aspect of Disobedience on the legs. When it gets to the feet slot, we want Aspect of the Ghost Walker, well unstoppable, and for 4 seconds after you gain 25% increased move speed and can move freely through enemies. This is fantastic because we're going to be unstoppable for a very long time thanks to Grizzly Rage, which is giving us a whopping 25% move speed, which is great. In addition to Grizzly Rage already giving us really great move speed, because instead of damage reduction we get move speed with turning into a werewolf instead of a werebear. So this is even more move speed, which is great. And here's the second unique you need to get. This one I would say is absolutely required, the Waxing Gibbous. And the reason it's required is because it basically makes your Shred a guaranteed critical strike. See, let's read this here. Gain stealth for 2 seconds when killing enemies with Shred. Breaking stealth with an attack grants ambush, which guarantees critical strikes for 1.5 seconds. So you become stealth, and then you basically get a guaranteed crit, which is really, really strong with this build. So this is a second source of guaranteed critical strikes, and those critical strikes deal increased damage. They cause poisoning, and then the poisoning gets basically turned into instant damage with Aspect of the Blurred Beast. So this is a key part of that build synergy. So highly recommend Waxing Gibbous for this build, or I should say maybe don't play this build until you have Waxing Gibbous. It is really, really strong. Over at the offhand, we have Accelerating Aspect. Critical strikes with core skills increase your attack speed by 23%, up to 25 for 5 seconds. Because Shred is a guaranteed critical strike, we can almost always have this amazing increased attack speed. Not to mention Blood Howl is going to give us that attack speed as well, so you're attacking very fast with this build. Moving up to the ring, Grizzly Rage now shapeshifts you into a Dire Werewolf. As a Dire Werewolf, you gain movement speed instead of damage reduction, right? We talked about that. And a 34% spirit cost reduction bonus. Kills heal you for 10% of your max life. Really great aspect. Absolutely love it. Any type of werewolf build typically will have this if you're going to go Grizzly Rage. And then we have Aspect of the Rampaging Werebeast in our other ring slot. Duration of Grizzly Rage is increased, which is nice. However, most importantly, it says critical strikes while Grizzly Rage is active increases your critical strike damage by 10% for the duration. So every time you get a critical strike, it increases your critical strike damage by 10%. It stacks over and over and over, making you do some absolutely ridiculous damage thanks to those guaranteed critical strikes we get, and it just adds up more and more. It's so powerful. And then finally, we get Stormclaw's Aspect. Critical strikes with Shred deal up to 45% of the damage dealt as lightning damage to the target and surrounding enemies. This is strong because we are going to get a lot more AoE effectiveness. Shred already does a melee cleave, but this really helps with AoE damage. It's going to make it so you can clear stuff really, really fast. So Stormclaw is absolutely a must and very strong with this build. Moving on to Spirit Boons, we're going to get Wariness pretty much every single build. I always get Wariness regardless. The 10% damage reduction from elites counts as elites, champions, bosses, world bosses, and bloodmark players. So just the 10% damage reduction from the game's most deadly opponents is great. And then we're going to get Swooping Attacks for 10% attack speed. We're just stacking attack speed because we want to teleport all around as fast as we can, attack as fast as we can. So Swooping Attacks is the best there. And then Calamity, we want Grizzly Rage to last as long as we can. And Calm Before the Storm, nature magic skills have up to a 10% chance to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 2 seconds. This is going to help get Grizzly Rage off cooldown as fast as we possibly can. And then finally, Masochistic, critical strikes with shape-shifting skills heal you for 3% max life. Very, very great to help your survivability. Now, last, let's talk about about the Paragon board, this gets a little crazy. Very similar to the Tornado build, you're going to start with Territorial in the starter board, and the first board you're going to want to go after is Heightened Malice. Well, when there are 3 or more poison enemies nearby, you deal 45% increased damage. So that's over on the right, and then you're going to go up and grab Toxic Bane, increase damage to poison enemies, and increase poison damage, right? Aspect of the Blurred Beast synergizes great with this. Envenom and Toxic Claws, all part of the synergy going on there. We're going to get the Fang and Claw glyph node right over here. You're going to want to level this up to at least level 20 in order to meet the requirements for this. This is going to give you increased damage to poison enemies, damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned, and while in Werewolf or Werebear form, close enemies take 12% increased damage from you. And then these 2 rare nodes are really great as well. Nature Born, this is all poison passives, rare node, damage to poison enemies, Sinking Fangs. And then over here in this board right above it is actually the Thunderstruck board, and we have access to a glyph very close, which is why we go for this. We're going to put the Werewolf glyph in here. For every 5 willpower purchased, you deal increased damage while in werewolf form, and an additional 10% DR while in werewolf form. So that's really great. Not only that, we can also get Stormcaller for storm skill damage and damage while in werewolf form. So good synergies over in this board, but we're not going to grab Thunderstruck. As we move left, actually, from this board, we're going to pick up the Lust for Carnage. Critical strikes with werewolf skills restore 2 spirit. We got guaranteed critical strikes from Wax and Gibbous. We got guaranteed critical strikes from our key passive, and so this is going to give us really good resource restore as we fight and kill stuff. So this is really great. The glyph here we're going to put is Undaunted. This is going to give us DR, the more fortify we have, generate a lot of fortify from Grizzly Rage. We also get a whopping 31.7% increased damage while fortified. So this is really great. This is a very strong one, Undaunted. And finally, we're going to move up above this node, and we're going to head to the Constricting Tendrils Paragon board, and there's actually a glyph right to the right where we're going to put Exploit. Now, if you are going to prioritize which glyph to go after first, I say go after Exploit. This is probably the strongest glyph in the entire game. This gives you increased vulnerability damage, but also when an enemy is damaged by you, they become vulnerable for 3 seconds. It's going to happen more than every 20 seconds per enemy. This is a reason why we want vulnerability on Stormstrike, because a boss is only get vulnerable for 3 seconds. We're going to want to refresh that with Stormstrike, and so that's why Exploit is a great glyph, but when it comes to bosses, we do want to be able to reapply it more quickly than every 20 seconds. So this is really great, and this also gives you increased vulnerable damage. And remember, with Diablo 4, different buckets is better than all in one bucket, so plus vulnerable damage is a very, very, very good bucket to build up, because you got core skill damage, you've got like werewolf skill damage, storm skill damage, and then vulnerable damage. And so you want to build up all those different buckets so that you do even more damage, because they're multiplicative, right? And then we also get courage, maximum life, willpower. It's a bit of a defensive one, and we can also pick up these increased vulnerable damage nodes here because their dexterity in this gets more vulnerable damage the more dexterity you get. And that's the Paragon board. I think this build is extremely fun. I don't know if it's, the best in the entire game for Druid. I really like Tornado, but this one definitely feels very fast. You're teleporting, you can get around quickly. I think it's very strong, and I think it has a lot of potential with this build, especially if you're trying to level up glyphs. You could probably clear dungeons the fastest since you're teleporting and moving so fast from monster to monster, shredding, dashing, right? So that's the build. If you guys like it, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe for more. My name's Toyhouze, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.